Catherine II, later known to the world as Catherine the Great, was not born Russian. She entered the world in 1729 as Sophie Friederich August von Anhalt-Zerbst, a minor German princess with modest prospects. Yet through an extraordinary combination of intelligence, ambition, and willpower, she would not only seize the throne of Russia, but also shape the destiny of the empire in ways few rulers before her had done. Her story is one of transformation, of a foreign-born outsider who, through her decisions, became more Russian than many who had ruled before her. When Friedrich first arrived in Russia as a teenager, she was far from the figure of imperial majesty she would later embody. She came to St. Petersburg in 1744 at the invitation of Empress Elizabeth, the daughter of Peter the Great. Elizabeth was searching for a bride for her nephew and heir, the Grand Duke Peter, himself a German prince of Holstein. Friedrich, though not from a powerful dynasty, was considered suitable, modest, intelligent, and adaptable. She converted to Russian Orthodoxy, taking the name Ekaterina Alexeyevna, a move that would prove to be far more than a political necessity. From the moment of her baptism, Catherine immersed herself in the Russian language, the Orthodox faith, and the culture of the empire she had chosen to serve. Unlike her husband Peter Fedorovich, who never ceased to idolize German customs, and the Prussian King Frederick II, Catherine embraced her adopted homeland with a passion that impressed even her detractors. Her marriage to Peter, however, was a disaster. Peter was immature, erratic, and more interested in playing with toy soldiers than in ruling a vast empire. Catherine, on the other hand, was serious, disciplined, and determined to make something of her life. Their incompatibility quickly became obvious. Yet Catherine did not allow her unhappy marriage to define her. Instead, she began to cultivate allies at court, building a network of friends, lovers, and political supporters who recognized her intelligence and potential. While Peter alienated the Russian nobility and insulted the Orthodox clergy with his open admiration for Prussia, Catherine was learning, adapting, and quietly waiting for her moment. That moment came in 1762. Empress Elizabeth had died, and Peter ascended the throne as Peter III. His reign, however, lasted only 6 months. Almost immediately, he offended nearly every power group in Russia. He withdrew Russia from the 7 Years' War in a humiliating peace with Prussia, undoing years of military victories. Russia had fought bravely and, astonishingly, had the war nearly won. Berlin trembled at the prospect of Russian troops marching in, and for a brief moment, history hung on a thread. Had Russia pressed forward, Germany might have become part of the Russian sphere, perhaps even fully under Russian control. But Peter, being an ardent admirer of Prussia and Frederick the Great, did the unthinkable. He abandoned the gains of war, returned conquered lands, and essentially handed back to Prussia everything Russia had bled for. He confiscated church lands, mocked the traditions of the Russian court, and openly expressed disdain for his wife. Nobles, guards, and clergy alike turned against him. This act stunned the Russian army, infuriated the nobility, and alienated the people. Trust in Peter evaporated almost instantly. To many, it seemed a betrayal not just of Russia's sacrifices, but of its rightful destiny. Catherine understood this perfectly. She saw the foolishness of her husband's decision and recognized how it eroded his legitimacy. For her, this opened a window of opportunity. With the support of the powerful Orlov brothers, her loyal guards regiments, and the tacit approval of much of the aristocracy, she staged a coup in June 1762. The coup itself was swift and decisive. Catherine appeared before the Izmailovsky regiment in full military uniform, sword in hand, and declared herself the sole ruler of Russia. Soldiers and nobles alike were captivated by her confidence. The coup spread rapidly through St. Petersburg, and within days Peter III was forced to abdicate. Shortly afterward, he died under mysterious circumstances, officially recorded as natural causes, though rumors of murder have persisted ever since. Whatever the truth, Catherine emerged victorious. She was no longer the obscure German princess. She was now Catherine II, Empress of all Russia. But what made Catherine truly great was not merely the coup, but what followed. Unlike many rulers who seize power through violence, she understood that legitimacy could not rest solely on force. She worked tirelessly to present herself as the rightful heir to Peter the Great, positioning herself as the continuation of his vision. In doing so, she tied her reign to the idea of Russia's greatness. Catherine styled herself as both an autocrat and an enlightened ruler, a paradox that defined her reign. Once in power, Catherine cultivated the image of an enlightened monarch. She corresponded with great thinkers like Voltaire and Diderot, absorbing the ideals of the Enlightenment. She dreamed of modernizing Russia, of reforming its laws, and of guiding it toward becoming a true European power. Yet here lies one of the greatest contradictions of her reign. She recognized the brutality and backwardness of serfdom. She knew that serfdom chained millions of peasants into misery and stood as an obstacle to progress. In her heart, she wanted reform. She even considered ways to diminish its stranglehold. But Catherine also understood the harsh reality of politics. She had come to power not by divine right, but through the support of the nobility and the military elite. Her throne rested on their loyalty. To challenge the institution of serfdom directly would have been to strike at the very foundation of noble privilege and risk losing the support that had raised her to power in the first place. For Catherine, it was a dangerous trap. She could not liberate the peasants without endangering her crown. And so, rather than loosening the bonds of serfdom, her reign ultimately tightened them. She showered nobles with privileges, expanding their control over their estates and their serfs. The result was paradoxical. While Russia's prestige grew abroad, at home, the gap between nobility and peasantry widened to dangerous extremes. Catherine also expanded Russia's borders dramatically, turning it into a true empire of continental scale. Under her rule, Russia fought successful wars against the Ottoman Empire, gaining access to the Black Sea and securing Crimea. She annexed large parts of Poland during the partitions, pushing Russia deep into Central Europe. By the end of her reign, the empire stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, from Poland to Siberia. Russia was no longer a peripheral kingdom on the edge of Europe, but one of the great powers of the world. And yet, her greatness lay not only in conquest or governance, but in her ability to embody Russianness. Though German by birth, Catherine came to see herself as Russian by destiny. She dressed in Russian style, spoke the language fluently, and practiced orthodoxy with sincere devotion. When foreign ambassadors mocked her origins, she countered that she had given her life, her heart, and her soul to Russia. And indeed, the Russian people came to see her as theirs. By the time of her death in 1796, Catherine had ruled for 34 years, longer than almost any other Russian monarch. She left behind an empire stronger, larger, and more respected than it had ever been. The girl who had once been an obscure German princess had become the soul of Russia. In her, the empire had found not just a ruler, but a symbol of its identity, bold, ambitious, and unyielding. Catherine, too, actively promoted culture, science, and education in Russia. She founded new universities, schools, and the Academy of Sciences, supported literature, and developed theater and the arts. One of her greatest legacies is the Hermitage. Catherine began collecting paintings, sculptures, and decorative art, turning it into a royal gallery. Today, the Hermitage is one of the largest and most significant museums in the world, housing over 3 million works of art and artifacts. Even during her lifetime, people began to call her the Great.